Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Sarah Schroeder, and I'm a program and events librarian here at Richland Library. Over the past few months, we've hosted programs about identity theft and phishing scams. We're continuing that focus on online security this evening. On May 6th, the Colonial Pipeline, the largest fuel pipeline in the United States, was the target of a ransomware attack. The energy company shut down the pipeline and later paid a $5 million ransom. Many of us probably heard about this from the news, but do we understand what really happens? What exactly are cyber attacks? How do they affect us? And what can we do to avoid them? Before I introduce our speakers, I want to remind you that we have a lot of great programs coming up, both virtual, and in person. Please visit richlandlibrary.com for the full schedule of events and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Please note the views and opinions expressed in today's program are those of our guests and do not necessarily reflect the position of Richland Library, as our organization does not endorse any specific agenda. There will be time for audience questions towards the end of the program. So if you'd like to submit a question, please use the Q&A feature and we will get through as many as we can. So to introduce our guests tonight, we have Geoffrey Fowler. Geoffrey is the Washington Post technology columnist, writing about how to navigate the confusing, occasionally scary, and deeply personal world of tech. He joined the Post in 2017 after 6 years with the Wall Street Journal, writing about consumer technology, Silicon Valley, national affairs, and China. He was raised in Columbia and attended Dreher High School. So hometown boy makes good. We also have Josh Todd. Josh is a strategic account executive at CrowdStrike, which is a cybersecurity technology company that provides cloud workload and endpoint security, threat intelligence, and cyberattack response services. Probably a mouthful. So I would like everyone to please welcome Geoffrey and Todd. So gentlemen, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to talk with you this evening about this because 2021 has been a little bit bananas for a lot of reasons, but in particular in our niche of the world because of these cyber attacks. So cyber attacks, it feels like this year in a really big way went from just something that you heard about on the news, might affect somebody, to something that's really impacting people's day-to-day lives. There was that Colonial attack, which shut down the pipeline, which made gas prices rise and made people wait in really long lines to get gas. There was JBS, the meat company, they got attacked, and it shut down like their ability to distribute meat. Like people may have heard that last week there was an attack against T-Mobile, the cell phone company. A lot of people's data got lost, but we're hearing of these stories every single day. Schools, local governments, nonprofits, small businesses, you name it, are getting attacked. So I guess my first question for you, Josh, as someone who spends all day long in this space, is what is going on out there? Why are these happening now in such a big way and really impacting our lives?
Yeah, it's an interesting time, especially for people like myself who spend, for many years now, all day, every day, talking about, dealing with cybersecurity and as part of our professional lives, because this has been the norm for a lot of us for a long time, right? But last year and specifically this year, really, it's become a lot more mainstream. With some of the really public breaches that are impacting individuals, like the pipeline's probably the best example, because especially in the Southeast where we are, a lot of people were directly impacted, like you couldn't get gas or the prices were really high or whatever, like you said. So for us, it's a little bit of kind of business as usual, just with a bit of an accelerated pace, but it's becoming where things used to be really sort of relegated to your very large corporations and things that didn't impact a lot of individuals, themselves. It was just impacting their companies. Now we're seeing a lot of changes where, organizations and service providers and goods providers are now being impacted, and it's impacting the individual beyond just the data theft aspect that we've seen for many years now. And it's really, most of that comes down to ransomware. Right?
Let's talk about that. That's a word that folks have heard a lot in the news, read stories about it in places like the Washington Post or wherever. What is ransomware? I mean, is it literally somebody walks into work one day and they try to log into their computer and there's like a ransom note on their computer that says, give me your data or give me money?
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's literally what it is, right? So they vary depending on sort of the flavor of the month of the strain of ransomware that you may be dealing with. But yeah, that's exactly what happens is, during a ransomware infection, it's literally the digital equivalent of a ransom operation. So if someone was kidnapped and held for ransom, it's the same thing, except they're not kidnapping a person. The adversary or your bad guy is kidnapping all your data. So they encrypt your data so that it's not accessible to you, and it takes your systems down, and then they hold it hostage and say, okay, you pay me the ransom of, like in Colonial's case, $5 million, and we'll give you the keys to unlock your data so that you can bring your business back online.
So is the threat always, we'll just lock it until you pay us? Or is it sometimes also like, if you don't pay us, we'll like sell it or release it onto the internet and all of your secrets will get out, or all your private data?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, so it's interesting because especially within probably the past, let's say 12 months thereabouts, right? We've seen, just as any normal business evolves, right, to better take advantage of a competitive situation, so does the ransomware operator. So they use extortionware is another way to think of it, right? Where they can take the data, lock it up where you can access it, but then if it's really sensitive information or private information of consumers or competitive and intellectual property, they can threaten to release it to the public as a motivator to get you to pay. And so they use that as a tool, a lever against the organizations that they've ransomed.
So if you're a business, you kind of have this dilemma, right? So somebody comes in, they've locked your systems down, and you have to choose either negotiate with them and pay them some money, or refuse. But if you refuse, you might not have enough backups, you might not be able to get your business online, you might go out of business. But if you go ahead and pay them the money, you're just encouraging more ransomware attacks to happen, right? So it just keeps, the market keeps going up and up and up and escalating. And it feels like that's a little bit what's happening, right? Like people are paying, so more bad guys come in and say, let's do it.
It is. It's definitely a bit of a kind of a prisoner's dilemma sort of situation, right? Do I pay the bad guys because we really need to get our business back in? And like in some cases, you may or may not have a choice, right? So take, for example, hospitals are a really big target for ransomware operators, right? And they're legitimately, people will die. They cannot go offline and stay offline. So they have very little choice in the matter. So more often than not, you see organizations like that, or utility providers, right? Local municipalities and 911 operators, right? They have to be up and running. So, they're in a very tough spot because there's also a lot of pressure, from both the ethical aspect of am I enabling the bad guys, right? And there's political pressure to not pay these. I mean, there's mandates from, because a lot of these operators operate in other countries, and if they can identify them solely enough to a specific, country or location that's embargoed, for example, right? And you are paying this ransomware operator, are you paying money to an embargoed country? So it's an interesting sort of moral and ethical quandary as well.
Totally. Now, just a brief programming pause for folks watching at home. I'm sure you have a zillion questions about how all this works and what you can do about it. We are going to get to your questions later in our program, so just type them into the chat window and we'll be sure to do that, but we'll keep chatting for now. So my next question then, Josh, is, okay, so why do ransomware now? Like, why is that rising now? Because we've heard in the past about other kinds of cybercrime, right? People were like stealing credit card numbers, or people were stealing social security numbers, or they were just getting data and selling it. But this is sort of new. So why ransomware now?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is money, right? These operators are driven by what is the fastest way to commoditize or get money back for my efforts. And like you say, if you go back some number of years, there would have been a large, you were seeing credit cards stolen, right? That was the big thing, right? Because that was the quickest way that they could monetize their efforts. And through really good efforts on the credit card providers side and many other reasons, the evolution to ransomware is because it's the fastest way that the bad guys can make money, right? And the reason, like, ransomware has been around for many years, a long time, but the reason that we're starting to hear more about it now, especially, and it sort of feels like it's accelerating over the past year or two, is because they've found a way to operationalize it that they couldn't in the past. So if you think of I use the analogy of like building cars, right? Before Henry Ford came along with the assembly line, ransomware operators, they were building cars, or ransomware things kind of the previous way, like by hand, going in and manually attacking a computer, and then manually spreading and trying to get it across. And so they've evolved their sort of method of operation to more of an assembly line. They actually have kind of a fairly well-defined kind of affiliate ecosystem within the ransomware operators group, where one group builds the ransomware, another group gets access to end users' computers, another group actually does the encryption, another group handles the taking the payments in Bitcoin. So they've really built a really well-oiled machine, and that's why it's accelerated, because they're getting good at their job, right? Frankly.
So you got subcontractors, you got folks who will write the software, folks who will do who will get you inside the computers, folks who will do the negotiation. So it's this whole industry. To put some numbers on it, we had a story in Washington Post that estimated, like, conservatively, last year, businesses paid about $412 million in the US for ransomware. So that's basically $500 million that was paid out to these criminals. And the amount that any business can have to end up paying can range between like 150,000 to 250,000 or more if they're really big organizations. So this is a lot of money for any one of these criminals, which makes me kind of wonder, so who are the bad guys here? Like, who's doing this? Like, what kind of person would say, I'm going to take over a hospital's like system, and these patients' lives are at stake here?
Yeah, I mean, so in my sort of professional work, we think of the bad guys, right, into sort of two kind of larger groups. One are kind of your nation state operators, like your countries, right? And the other and the ones you hear about in the news most of the time are non-affiliated. We just call them general e-criminals. It's kind of a general term, right? So they can have a different specialization, but they run the gamut, right? A lot of them are former military trained from some countries. Some can be just people that stumbled into it, but there's also, like, you cannot make the mistake of thinking that this is a bunch of kids in their garages, which is kind of like the mental image that people still have for hackers is, a guy with a hoodie in his garage, pounded away. These are full-blown enterprise businesses, right? A lot of these have payroll and pay time off, and it's like, think of it as a normal business. But generally we see most of the ones you hear about in the news they're located in nations that don't have agreements for to extract individuals from another country. So they can safely operate in another country without fear of being prosecuted in America.
And President Biden has repeatedly pointed at Russia and saying that Russia has harbored some of these. And we know that the organization behind the colonial attack, which used the name DarkSide, was based in Russia. But it's not just Russia. Like, it can be, like, I've heard stories about Belarus and other Eastern European countries, and then also just like North Korea can get involved, like as a nation state.
Yeah, North Korea is one of the interesting ones because they're almost unilaterally the only one that where a nation state actor actually engages in criminal activity like ransomware operations, and purely to generate money, right? Because of the embargoed situation and just that North Korea has dealt with, they need a way to generate income, and this is what they do, right? But there's other, you see them with other drivers, but they're the only nation state adversary, like the actual North Korean government, that will engage in operations to generate income from cyber attacks. So they're an interesting one.
So let's talk about how all this happens. Let's get into a little bit of the nitty gritty. So I know in some businesses, it just turns out that they don't have up-to-date software. They're running really old stuff. They haven't hired smart cybercrime professionals like yourself you're not a cybercrime professional, you're an anti-cybercrime professional, sorry about that. The good guys, they don't have the money to do that, so they just have holes in their system. But oftentimes, it's often that they're sort of taking advantage of the people who work in these organizations as a way to get in. And so that's what I think for a lot of our viewers is probably really scary. So like, what is it that we're doing that's possibly putting our employer at risk? None of us wants to be that guy or that girl who clicked on that thing that made all this get really bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said one of it, right? Clicked on that thing, right? That's kind of your first, the human element is one that the adversaries take advantage of all the time, right? Social engineering has been and will forever be one of the best tools of the trade for a cyber attacker, right?
So define what that means. What is social engineering?
So it's basically, it's a fancy way of saying a con, right? To really boil it down to a simple term, it's engineering a person rather than a computer system, right? And the most common example that we see every day, all day, is spam, right? With phishing links, right? That you see that getting your fake delivery notification or your fake credit card charge or your order was canceled or whatever, right? That you see those all day, every day. But it's moving beyond, like if you go, even just 4, 5, 6 years ago, it was almost entirely limited to email phishing, right? And now it is as much text message phishing and robocalling as it is email. But social engineering is still, you can take many forms, but that's the human element of the cyber attack. And it's both the greatest weakness and it's also the biggest point of defense, right? Because you can be a well-armed, individual is much more, a much more method of protection than, as much money as you want to throw at software and protection systems and whatnot.
So just to take it back a level again, so the con artists here are basically trying to get employees at companies and organizations to click a bad link, open an attachment that might have some software in it, log in to the wrong website, hand over your password, one of these sorts of things. And they do that by conning us, by making us think that, and they've got all these techniques, and some of which we've learned, and maybe we should talk about what they are just so that we can recognize them. But the most common one is called phishing. That's phishing with a P and an H. And that's just where it looks like it might be an email from your boss, or it looks like it might be an email from someone in HR that says that they've got a raise maybe for you, or that they accidentally send out an Excel spreadsheet with everybody's salary in the company, and you're like, ooh, that's juicy, I want to see that. Just somehow getting you to kind of have an emotional response to what's in that email or in that message, and then click on it and thus let them into the system. Is that kind of the number one way?
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely. And the emotional aspect of it that's the driver, right? It's either something that's very interesting to you or something that's time limited, like it's very urgent, or it's something that scares you, right? Something, that's trying to get you to act irrationally, right? So, but yeah, the major driver most of the time is to get you to click something and fill out a form that is not actually like a username and password that's not actually the site you're trying to go to, or getting you to enable the ability to run some piece of malicious code, right? Some malware.
Now, some of our viewers today might think that they're pretty sophisticated and can spot this a mile away. And I used to think that about myself as well. But increasingly, it can be hard to spot. But there are some things you can look for. Like sometimes the email address might have one wrong character in it or one wrong letter. So that's a sign. Or it might look like it's a short email, but if you hover over it, it's actually a really long address that goes to someplace completely different. But are there other things that we could try to look for to spot the bad things?
I mean, yes and no. Some it is possible for them to make a completely convincing phishing email that it is possible to detect. But most of the time, the average like phishing message doesn't go through that much effort. Like if you take a minute and look at it, you can see either like it'll say that it's from Geoffrey, and if I mouse over it, it's actually from someone else at a random Yahoo or Gmail or whatever, account, some fake account. So just a little bit of inspection, but the biggest thing, like far and away, pick it whether it's email or a text message or a phone call, is be a little, like, I hate to say this, but like, be a little pessimistic, right? Assume that most of the time it's not legitimate, right? And like, I hate to be that way, but like, that's the way that I approach most email that I get, most phone calls, right? I assume that it's not
legit.
Because most of the time it's not. Yeah.
I've been getting all of these text messages. I'm sure some of our viewers have been getting these as well, saying, track the status of your Amazon package, or here's your USPS code, or you've won, something, some prize or something. And I'm especially skeptical of those if I haven't, already known that I just signed up for it, or I just asked for it, because they'll try any of these techniques to get to. They'll try your email, they'll try your text message, they'll try social networking. So they might go on your LinkedIn and use your LinkedIn to see what your job title is. And particularly if you have a job title that sounds like you might have access to some important systems, you're in accounts, or you're, executive assistant to the CEO or something, that puts a big target on your head.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at some of the interesting, we talk about North Korea again, I don't know why they came back up, but like they had an interesting sort of campaign over the last year or so, where they were actually going and doing a lot of social engineering on LinkedIn specifically for individuals that worked at companies that they were interested in, right? So it was research groups and whatnot. So they did a lot of LinkedIn social engineering on a social media platform, which was Yeah.
Now, if I'm remembering this correctly, there was a kind of notorious hack of the Democratic Party back when Hillary Clinton was running for president, and Leon Panetta, who was her campaign manager, got a phishing email that said, you need to reset your password. So that's one of the things they might try to trick you into. He says, this looks fishy. He forwarded it to someone in his tech team who said, oh yeah, you should do that. And then he clicked on it, and it turned out that it was phishing, and he handed over the keys to the kingdom to, I believe it was Russian hackers. So it can happen to,
it can happen to anyone. Yeah. And the lesson there, like if you had to take away one, like that's a great example. The lesson there, and this applies to everything, whether it's Amazon or your utility company or whoever, is just don't click the links. Like for whatever it is, like even if you think that it's legitimate, like personally, if I get something from Dominion or whoever it may be, right, our utility provider, don't click the link. Just go visit the website, log in like you normally do, and you eliminate an entire attack vector by just never clicking those things.
That's a really good tip. And we're going to have a bunch of these during our session today. But whenever we have one of these really, really good live by these, I'm going to go like this. So here's, I'm going to do my sign. But like that is, if you get something in the mail or text or email or whatever that says there's some problem with your account, don't click on anything in the message. Just go log in directly to Amazon yourself. Go to the Amazon site you trust. Go to the bank site you trust. Go to whatever it is, so that you're in the real place as opposed to wherever they're trying to take you.
Yeah, and the same thing applies to like phone calls, right? If you get a phone call from someone and you're not 100% sure, just hang up and call the number for the business or the organization, whoever it is, and verify, right? Because it's shocking how trusting we are just as humans, right? We naturally are. And they're like, oh, it's the alarm provider, whoever, right? And you just, oh, okay, yeah. And you just hang up, call the number, and follow back up that way.
Yeah, and like the worst thing, I mean, what they're trying to take advantage of is that you don't want to be embarrassed, that you're trying to be polite, you're trying to be a good, nice person. But like, honestly, like if it's really a doctor's office or really bank, like they would rather you be safe. So they will not take offense with you saying like, thank you for your call. I can't talk to you right now. I'll call back. And then don't call the number that they called you. Go and call the real number for your bank or for your.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with just saying, look, I don't feel comfortable talking about this on the phone. Is it okay if I call back on the customer service line, or however you want to go about it? But like you're exactly right, especially here in the South, right? We want to be nice, we want to be courteous, and that's okay. But there's a courteous way to do it and still protect yourself.
Yeah, that's really important because that's what they're taking advantage of, the kindness of folks, and that's why they're frankly they prey sometimes on older folks who are more inclined to try to be kind or gentle to folks. So don't let them take advantage of your goodness.
Yeah, and I mean, like like if you see like there's a lot of like the less technically savvy the target is, the more they do that, right? So like if you see like on the elderly or the older people that are not quite as savvy, and you've seen a lot of it with like it's a fake Microsoft or computer support engineer. So, okay, tip for everyone: Microsoft is never going to proactively call you on the phone, right? Nor is the IRS, right? So, like just be skeptical. Like I hate to say that, but be skeptical.
Yeah, that's the world we live in now. They can also now fake the phone numbers that they're calling from. So, believe it or not, I have gotten fake calls from both Apple support. The phone number listed on the call, the callback number was the actual number from Apple support, but they were able to fake that. And then my favorite example of all, a week ago, I got a call from the White House. It was literally Joe Biden's phone number because I looked it up, claiming that they needed to talk to me, but it was not the White House. Joe Biden, I mean, I'm happy to talk to him if he wants to talk about cybersecurity and these other sorts of issues, but he was not calling me about that. It was some scammers. So they can really fake this stuff. Okay, but here's another like let's get real kind of question. So let's say you accidentally clicked on something. A lot of us are working from home, telecommuting. You're not around a colleague. What do you do? Do you just unplug everything real quick, keep your head down, hope nobody noticed?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Like first and foremost, if it's involving a work email, right, or on your work phone or whatever, right, most organizations have someone you can report that to, right? Don't be afraid to do that. That's a good thing. Do it early, do it often. Report it to either if you have a cybersecurity team or security awareness or just a general security, anyone. Just report it so that you can get it out there and notified, and that your organization can go take the appropriate things. Most of the time, it's going to be things like resetting your passwords for anything you might be involved, right? So like if you do this, and there's everybody can be fooled. Everybody can be fooled. So don't feel like victim shaming is a real thing, right? We see that all the time, right? Don't feel like you should feel ashamed because you were phished, right? It happens to everybody, right? So but go and if it's something and you clicked on a form and you filled out, tried to log in, and then you realized, oh wait, that's not the actual thing, go reset your password right away, right? Immediately you reset your password. And there are things that you can do ahead of time to put yourself in a better position. We'll talk about some of those later, but report it to whoever. If it is your personal thing and it's something at home, the best bet is reset your password. And most of your organizations that you deal with will also have a place either on their website or in their contact us field where you can notify them as well to let them know that there was some perhaps fraudulent activity, right? Banks are great ones because they have entire armies of people to help go check that sort of thing, but most organizations do as well, and you can't hurt yourself by reporting it.
Yeah. So and also sort of legally speaking, if you are concerned that you clicked on something bad and you might get fired over it, you are less likely to get fired if you report it right away so that they have, so that your IT team has a chance to maybe try to stop it from doing anything naughty, than if you just hide and then they come back to you later. Or God forbid, if you try to solve it yourself, like you get some kind of ransom note on your work computer and you're like, oh, I'll just pay this and then maybe they'll never notice and maybe I'll get away with it. That's not going to end well for you.
Yeah, no, report it. It's just like treat treat that it's cyber crime, right? But it's treated like any other crime. Report it, right? If you see something, say something.
Right. So another question that kind of comes up is like, but wait a minute, is this really our fault, like as employees, or is it our employer's fault? Like why? Because everything we've talked about so far is like putting the blame kind of on our shoulders to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, no, I mean no, it's not the individual's fault first and foremost, right? And it's not necessarily the employer's fault, because it's a hard problem to solve, right? Because it's a bit of a cat and mouse sort of system. By the time that, companies like the ones that I work for, or I've spent time with in the past, we create solutions to try to protect organizations. And then the adversary evolves, and they see that, and they change that, to try to get around it. In fact, so it's always just sort of a cat and mouse thing. So no, it's never like, I would never say it's the employee's fault. Like there are things you need to do. Like most organizations have some kind of security awareness training or things you can do. And if you don't, there's lots of free training out there to just give you good general tips and tricks and sort of things you can do to protect yourself. But no, it's not. And one of the things in just sort of the line of work that I do is it can happen to anyone, no matter how well protected or how well prepared you are. A motivated adversary, like a motivated country that wants to make something happen, given enough time or motivation or money, will. So yeah, don't feel like it's your fault.
Totally. I mean, there are things that companies are increasingly, steps that companies are increasingly taking. At my company, the Washington Post, there's a lot of people who would like to get inside our systems and publish whatever on our website or who knows what. But some of the things that we've got in place, and maybe some of our viewers at home have experienced some of these. So right in our email system, there's a big button that says phishing. Any email we get that we suspect phishing, you tap that, it alerts them, and then it can flag the whole system. Also, on our emails, every time anybody sends you a link in the email, like the words are underlined in the text of the message, it takes that link out of it and republishes it as a separate thing, so you can see where it's actually linking to. You can see the full address, and it like alerts like, this is an outside link. You may or may not be able to trust this. You may or may not be able to trust the sender of this email. Another thing that we do is that we have they randomly test us. So every once in a while, our IT department will send out their own phishing link, maybe in an email that looks really, fun, or maybe it looks like it's got like a really cute cat in the picture, and you want to like go see the cat do cute cat things. And if you click it, they'll say, "Aha, we caught you. You weren't being sufficiently skeptical." And then if you are the person who reports it back to IT, very quickly they'll pat you on the head and say, "Good job, Jeff." So I like.
Yeah, one of my former places I used to work, actually, I was one of the part of the business that we were in, was kind of user awareness training, for lack of a better term. And yeah, there's an entire, you would not believe the amount of effort and thought that goes into those sorts of solutions. And it's good just to train muscle memory, just like anything else, and just maintain that healthy level of skepticism.
Exactly. So just a reminder to everybody watching, we're taking questions over in the Q&A tab. We'll be getting to some of those. We've already gotten some really good ones in, so I'm looking forward to that. But just a little bit more to go with me and Josh, and then we'll dig into some of those. So Josh, we've talked a lot about ransomware so far, but not all of these attacks are ransomware. The thing that just happened with T-Mobile, I think it might be on a lot of people's minds. 40 million customer records from T-Mobile just got basically released out into the wild. Things like people's passwords, their PINs, their credit card numbers, maybe even their driver's license numbers. Is that kind of like a more classic kind of cyber attack?
It is. Like, if you think of the ways that they could, the bad guy could monetize things, right? There was a lot of ways where you can monetize information, whether it's opening up fake credit card accounts or opening up fake charge cards or accounts. Take your pick. They've become a little less valuable over time, those types of things, just the actual raw personal information of itself, just frankly, because there's been so much of it that the value has been diluted. The advice I give most people is just assume your personal information has been compromised. because chances are it probably has. There's some good websites out there you can actually go to check. There's Have I Been Pwned? If you've ever seen that, it's a site where you can go look up and see. You can put in your email address and see if your email address has been found in the majority of the data leaks that have been reported on the internet. So, and yours has. Probably, it's pretty safe to assume everyone's most likely has. So.
And for folks at home, that's Have I Been Pwned? That's PWNED. Is that right? Did I spell that right? And that's a site. It's an amazing site. It's run by this Australian guy who just does this out of the goodness of his heart. He scours the dark web. He scours the darkest parts of the internet to try to find what they know about you out there, and reports it so that you can look it up yourself. You can type your email address. You can even type in your password and see if it's been reported anywhere. So that's enough to give you probably a fright. So let's go to some advice, some general advice before we head into the folks' questions. So we talked a little bit about sort of just raising your general level of skepticism in general. So that's super key, but it's kind of like hard if you're kind of like a nice person and you're generally, you want to think the best of the world, to kind of all of a sudden be kind of this negative person. But I take it, what else would be like number one on your list of basic steps that normal people need to take?
So that, like, far and away, the number one thing that you can do to protect yourself and sort of any cyber technology related thing is just update your stuff, right? Generally, like if you're talking about Windows, do Windows Update. If it's Mac, make sure you have your latest iOS patch, right? Update whatever it is. And that's both the operating system and the applications, or the stuff you have installed. If there's an update for Office or Adobe Reader or whatever it is, you know, everybody knows it gets annoying to see those thousands of things that are automatically being updated, but do that, because the reason that the updates are there, more often than not, it's not they're introducing some new feature, it's they're closing holes that they found in the software. So like, that's the best thing you can do by a country mile. Not a magic fix, but like that's number one, number two, number three, number four, number five, all wrapped up into one, is do that.
I love it. So Josh shows that we are once again in sync. That was number one on my list. I made a short list of stuff I would do. Was update your software. Okay, I'll tell you what number two was on my list. You could tell me if you agree. And that is to get a password manager. So now this is going to be a little controversial with some folks, but here's the deal with passwords. We've sort of gotten the wrong message about passwords over the last couple of years. We think that if we have one that involves 27 different kinds of characters and like weird symbols and numbers and caps, that we're safe. But that's actually not what makes us safe. The thing that makes us safe is using a different password for every single website and app and service. But the problem is our brains cannot hold that many passwords in them, especially if they're kind of complicated in a way as they should be, and they have numbers and characters and things. And the only way around that is to get a password manager. And the reason why it's not safe to use the same password over and over again on different apps and services is because here's what the bad guys do. They go in, they steal the passwords from one website, and then they go and they'll try all those passwords on a different website. So if you're using the same password for your account over at Bank of America, and then you go over and as well as on Wells Fargo, if they get it from Bank of America, they're going to go try it on Wells Fargo, and then they have your account. So do not use the same password everywhere. You need a password manager. So what's a password manager? It's just an app on your phone, on your computer, that you just keep all these passwords in. And there are some good ones out there now, and they will automatically insert your password in for you on the app. So it'll even save you time. You do have to commit to using it. You do have to like put it all in there. But once you kind of trust the password manager, it can make your life better. There's a bunch of good ones. I use one called Dashlane. It's kind of the most expensive out there, so you do got to pay it to use, about $5 a month or something. But there's other ones, 1Password. There's some others. What are some of your favorites, Josh?
Yeah, so those I would say my top three would probably be Dashlane, 1Password, and LastPass. Right, those are probably your really common ones. There's not like a right or wrong answer. Using any of them is better than not using the greatest one in the world. But like, just use it. It takes some effort, but it's also like, and the reason that that you need one is to Jeff's point is like one of the attacks, like, and you've seen some recent ones, look at T-Mobile, like, is password stuffing is what it's called. It's like they can take that one password and in less than a second run that same password and try to log into 25,000 different websites. And if you have the same password on another one, they're going to get in, right? And the one that you really like, your golden ticket one, is if they get into your email, because then they can go to the other sites and reset your passwords to other places after they reset your email. And, you know, so like, use a different password. I don't know my password for anything I use anymore because I use a password manager, right? And it automatically, if you got an Android or Apple device, it'll automatically integrate there. So you can just click the button and it'll fill it in for you. Use them. And because they're all different, it takes the sting out of any one place being compromised, right? So if like this site gets compromised and your account, you know, and your password was lost as part of that breach, you've protected yourself because that password doesn't access anything else.
Yep. So Josh, what's next on your list of the things everybody should do to stay safer?
So my number 2 or number 3, they were kind of close together, would be right after password manager would be to use anywhere that offers it. And most places are getting to the place where they do now use multi-factor authentication, right? You can, some people call it 2-factor authentication or 2FA or MFA, but it's that mechanism where like when you log into somewhere, either it sends you a text message or it pops up a login on your phone, on the app, or some other way where it's another factor to log in. That is, apart from having unique passwords and super safe passwords, that's a way where like you can just add another layer of protection, because if you do lose your password or they do guess it or crack it, they still don't have that other text message or that other app authenticator to log into whatever the site is. So there's so many breaches that could have been mitigated just by having MFA turned on.
100%. Anywhere you can turn it on, turn it on. And I wish that companies made this a little easier. Some companies haven't really even offered it until pretty recently. Amazon waited a long time to really offer that to people, but they do now have it. So just, you know, take 30 minutes one morning and think of all the websites and apps you use most often. Go in, change your password, put that in your password manager, but also while you're there, see if they offer 2-factor or multi-factor authentication and sign up for it. If you want to be extra safe about it, while you're signing up for 2-factor, a lot of companies will just send you that code that you type in over text message. But the problem with text messages is we've learned with things like that T-Mobile hack, sometimes the bad guys can use the information they get from the T-Mobile hack to take over your text messages so that they could then see it and steal it from there. It's like, does this have no end? No, it has no end, but that's what they're doing. So the way to get around that is, instead of getting it over text message, sometimes these sites will give you the option to use what's called an authenticator app. Google makes a good free one. And basically it's an app that you line up with whatever that service is that gives you a code that changes every minute or so, and you type in that code, and then that's a way to be protected. So that's the extra double plus safe to go about 2-factor, but you know, that can have some value.
Yeah, absolutely. But like don't let the fact that if a site only offers text-based 2FA, a text message, use it, right? It's so much better than not having anything at all.
Yeah. Okay, the next one on my list, just because I get this a lot of old school people with computers are like, oh, you need antivirus, you need whatever. And look, it's not that viruses and malware have gone away as problems. It's just that we've got all these other new problems now, things like those phishing messages and taking over your accounts. So what I say to people is, yes, it probably is worth getting some malware protection for either your PC or for your Mac. Macs get malware just as much as everybody else. And if you do happen to click on something naughty, it might help protect you from something being installed on your computer that you don't want. My personal favorite free malware protection, like if you just need something, but Josh, you might disagree with me. I use Malwarebytes. That's Malwarebytes. If you pay, you can get a slightly more advanced version, but the free one's pretty good. I use it on a Mac. I put it on my work PC, and it's caught some stuff before, so I'm pretty happy with that. What's your view on, Josh? What's your view on
Yeah. I mean, again, it's one of those where anything is almost better than nothing, right? But yeah, it's definitely there. There's definitely, you're going to see it. It will catch most of the thing with like a antivirus, like as a general rule, is it'll catch most of the commodity stuff, like your common stuff. The average individual isn't getting any super rare nation state grade, weapons grade malware. So it's, you're gonna do a lot. You're gonna get 99% of the stuff. But the big thing is get something. It's better than nothing. But only, again, as long as you're keeping it updated as well, right? So if you see like the way that those types of solutions have evolved in like the companies, a lot of the functionality is there to give the companies the ability to respond. So it's, AV's come a long way, and but yeah, get something, take your pick. I don't want to influence people on whatever. The manufacturers have gotten a lot better than they were, 5 or 10 years ago as well. So
okay, so we're about to get to y'all's Q&A questions. So send them in. They're coming in. They're looking great. There's some good stuff for us to sink our teeth into. But before we do, Josh, anything else that makes your list of basic things everybody should do?
Yeah, there were a couple of things when we were sort of preparing for this that less on the preventative side, or preventing the bad thing from happening, because again, like I don't want to come across too pessimistic, but chances are better than not that something will happen to you, give it over time, right? Whether it's a company you use is breached, or you accidentally click on something or whatever. So there are things to do to prevent sort of the really bad things, a lot of the monetary impacts, the financial impacts of some of these things. And so like the biggest thing, some like good advice, and we've seen this recently, but like go freeze all your credit, like your credit, go to your credit agencies and freeze your credit reports, right? It's a way to take the ability for someone to do something with your data if they do steal it, or limit it, give you some availability. So go freeze your credit. It's free now for all the credit agencies. It used to not. They used to charge you for it, but you can freeze your credit now. And there's other ones that people don't think of, right? So you've got Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, your big ones, but there's also Innovis is a fourth one that most people don't know about. And then the other one that I like is called Checks Systems with an X, Checks Systems. And that's where most, like when you open a bank account, they verify it there as well. So those are some ones that people don't think about as much, but like you can take the sting out of a lot of someone being able to take a loan out or open a credit card or do anything with your personal information just by freezing your credit score or your credit score.
And so for folks who don't know, so basically these are the companies, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, some of those other ones that credit cards or banks will check in with before they'll allow someone to open an account. So that means if you've told them to freeze it, and every American has the right to do that, or there's also services that sometimes will do that for you, no one can start a new account. No one can start a new checking account. No one can start a new credit card in your name, including you, until you've unfrozen that. And it's just this extra layer of protection, and it won't hurt your credit score. It won't mess up your identity protection. It will, in fact, probably just protect you more.
Yep. The other one, and then the other, like it's a small thing. Most people I think do this now these days, but stop using debit cards. Stop using debit cards. Like just do not use a debit card. If you have one, turn it off. If you have the ability to use a credit card instead, treat it like a debit card. So pay it off just like you would normally a debit card. But the reason there is you have a lot more protection in the event of someone stealing a credit card as opposed to a debit card. So you have a lot more, recourse to get your money back or get the charges refunded or whatever. So just do that. Like I have to, in normal situations, I travel a lot for work, right? So, and it's amazing how often the credit card machines at gas stations have been compromised. And like I would see a random somebody trying to use my credit card after I'd been in, some other location just because they stole. So like, that's why I always use credit cards now and never use a debit card, because you can immediately get the charges reverted with a credit card, whereas you might have to go and chase it and spend some time with your bank on a debit card.
It has happened to me as well, as careful as I am about all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of people don't realize that the credit card industry works different than the debit card industry. A credit card inherently comes with an anti-fraud guarantee. that if you didn't actually authorize that purchase, whoever is that bank or American Express or Visa will step in and pay the bill back, right? You won't be held liable for that. But that does not happen with debit cards. Another thing, a related one, is if you're shopping on a website that you've not been to before, it's not a big mainstream one, it's not your Amazons or eBays or whatnot. Maybe it has something you want, but you just don't know. If there's ever an option to pay with PayPal, take that, because that way PayPal stands in between you and that business and will hide your credit card number, will hide all your kind of stuff. And so if that company, as great as they might be, gets hacked somewhere down the road, that they won't be able to reveal your credit card number. So it can be an extra layer of protection for you. That was the original concept of PayPal back when they first made it back in the day, because in the really early days of the internet, Wild West, people just didn't trust anything at all. So that's what PayPal was around for. And it still is helpful for that.
Yeah, there's another site, like if you do a lot of online shopping, you can use things like there are sites that give you like pseudo credit cards, like privacy.com lets you create a temporary credit card that's tied to yours, but you use publicly another number so that you have another layer of abstraction there. So use the credit card privacy to your advantage.
Another good one is using Apple Pay or Google Pay. They've added extra technology in those systems that will protect your credit card number from someone who might steal it down the line. So if you get the option, yeah, use it. I use it every time I can.
And then the last thing on my list that I did want to say, just because it's worth it, like especially for at home, for your personal computers or whatever it may be, back up your data, right? Back it up. Like even if it's like your treasured family pictures or whatever, that would be the thing that would upset you the most if you lost it. Think about if you lost that and back it up, right? Just because that way, if your computer does get ransomware and you don't want to pay $2,000 or whatever it may be, you have a way to go get that data back and restore, your ability to whatever the data was. But there's lots of online backup, services like, the Apple and Google, they all have theirs as well. Take your pick. I don't want to influence you, but like find a way to back up your data somewhere else besides just your computer. Even if it's just going and buying an external hard drive and plugging it in and copying the stuff there and sitting in the closet, it's better than nothing.
Yep, I 100% agree. I'm so nervous about all this. I both back it up online and I have a hard drive sitting right next to me right now that's keeping a backup of all my photos, because like those are my memories. I don't want to lose those. Like, don't give the bad guys any chance. One more thing from a viewer, Lola points out, while you're making good backups of things, make sure you write down and keep your credit card freeze information if you do that, like how you did it and what it was, so that you can unfreeze it if you ever do need a new credit card. So that's a good one to include
this kind of ties back earlier, but like that's also where the same password manager where my password is stored is also where I have all of that information locked away as well, right? Because you can store, like when you log into Experian or whoever it may be, you can store additional info there, like your password reset questions or whatever it may be. You can have that in there with it.
Yeah. One other thing I really like about password managers is nobody wants to think about this, but someday we're all going to die, and you're going to want the people you leave behind to be able to access your collection of photos, to be able to access your bank account, to access all this kind of stuff. And these days, the good password managers all have a function built in where if after a certain amount of time you can't access your account, you can identify before you pass away who can access it. And that's just super great, can make things so much easier for the folks you leave behind. So that's another reason to use one of those. Okay, so we're almost running out of time and we've talked too much, but I want to get to some more of these questions. So let's burn through some of them. So here's one, Josh, that I wonder if you and I have the same answer on, so we shall see. The question is, does using a VPN make me more secure? And my answer is not really, unless you happen to be like in a place like China or a place where you know that there could be somebody naughty sitting on the same network. But for the most part, it is not, you notice it didn't make our list of top 5 or even top 10 things you can do to be more safe online. What do you think, Josh?
Not really. I mean, the only benefit there is it removes the ability for, like, if you're concerned about someone intercepting your traffic and seeing it, in between, then yes, it provides some security there, and it enforces encrypted communications, whereas some sites may not have that enforced for you by default. But you know, it doesn't hurt. Like, it doesn't hurt if you want to use one, right? Most people I see using VPNs to do things like watch Netflix from another country, right? But it doesn't hurt you necessarily.
Right.
But it's not some magic bullet either.
It's not something I would spend $10 a month on just to have. I would much rather spend $10 a month on the biggest, best, most mamba jamba password manager for you and everybody in your family to all really keep safe online. That's much more worth the money, I think. Okay, next question. Which is safer, using the apps of a company or their websites? This is from Virginia. What do you think, Josh?
I don't have a real strong opinion either way. The one thing I would say is generally, you can see what versions of the app, so you can see how quickly or how often your app's developers are updating it. So you can see if someone has been 2 years, then I don't feel too great about using that. But the one thing I'll say about websites period is it's another tip. It wouldn't be in my top 5, but it'd be top up there somewhere. Is for your web browsers on your computers, whether you use Edge or Chrome or Firefox or whatever, is the biggest tip I can tell you about that is don't install add-ons and extensions and other things like that. So like if you remember the ask.com browser, all that stuff that used to pop up all the time, like that is a recipe for disaster. Just don't do it. There's no benefit that outweighs the risk that those things provide. Yep,
I agree. And that's the reason why I would actually tell people maybe use the apps if you have a choice. Because first of all, a lot of people end up with random things installed in their browser that they don't even realize. I'm always like, whenever a friend asks me to come help them with a computer problem or something, and I go and I look at the browser, I often have a moment of like, like, what do you got in there? And oftentimes it's because maybe they clicked on something that they didn't realize and it added some kind of toolbar, or maybe they saw there's all these commercials on TV now for like, oh, install the Honey browser to get discounts and whatnot. And yeah, you might want those coupons, but you're also sending data about everything you do on the internet to this company. And is that something that you really want to be part of? That's a separate conversation about privacy, but still, I don't want anybody looking at what I do in a browser when I look at it on the internet. So I personally choose, when it comes to web browsing, I would choose a web browser, first of all, that has some of these security and privacy protections built in. I use Firefox. I happen to think that it's a nonprofit. It's on our side as consumers. They're fighting against for our privacy. They're fighting against for our security. Safari does a really good job if you've got a Mac. They also do some of these things. Plain old vanilla Chrome is popular, but it can get you into lots of trouble. So I'm not a fan of that. But I know that's a controversial point of view as well. But that's what I do in my world. And the advantage to using the apps is that you're going to the right place. Like if you downloaded from the legitimate Apple App Store or the legitimate Google Play Store, that Wells Fargo app, you're in Wells Fargo and not in Fells Wargo.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's the other thing, like just sort of a tip is, as tempting as it may be, for whatever special sauce, version they do, only download apps from the official app stores. Like never, ever, ever, ever download something from a third party or direct download site, because those are never good.
Yep. Okay. So another question here. Can we be sure that Have I Been Pwned and the password managers are secure? Well, so this viewer has learned the number one lesson of today, which is be skeptical. So I'm here for it. Thank you. Excellent question. I would say before you trust anything, make sure that somebody that you trust has vetted it. So that's a service, for example, that I provide to readers of the Washington Post. So I don't recommend things that I haven't tried myself. And I get on the phone with the people who make these things and I quiz them. And you do not want to be on the other side of that phone call with me when I'm quizzing you about your security and privacy practices. So yes, I have spoken to the man who makes Have I Been Pwned And I think he's great. And I speak to folks like Josh about these folks before I recommend them. So yes, that one's good. And all the password managers that we mentioned today, I can personally vouch. I have done the same thing too. I have, whenever there's new reports out that they might have a security problem, I bring it to them. I say, you better explain this, buddy. What are you doing? So in general, if you want a rule of thumb as to know who to trust on the internet, trust someone that you know how they make money. How do they make money from running a password manager? If it's 100% free, where's their bread buttered? I don't know. That's why I choose the password manager that costs the most money. It costs $5 a month, because I know that its whole financial backing is based on providing you this successful service. With Have I Been Pwned, Troy makes money by selling that list that he's got to other companies that then incorporate it into their products. So if you use things like certain web browsers now, certain email services, if they notice your passwords are out there on the dark web because of that list, they'll send you a notice. They'll pop up a thing that says, hey, you should know that you're at risk. So he's kind of made a business out of trying to get that information into people's hands. But that's a good way to trust this stuff. But yeah, it's right to be skeptical. Do you have any more thoughts on that, Josh?
No, that was it. I mean, and like, do you, just like anything else, do your research ahead of time. More often than not, you can go to, an authoritative source, like, or more than one, to corroborate, what you're looking for, to see, look, do 5 major, very public places recommend this thing, then, there's a better chance than the one that costs, 1 cent a month off of, the back of a truck or something. So yeah, just.
Or it's free, supported with ads or whatever it might be.
I mean, look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with free. A lot of times they are supporting it with ads, so you have to deal with just the ads, right? But like, I'm on the same boat. Like, if it's something that's that important to me, it's worth me paying $5 or $10 a month or whatever it is to protect my family, right?
The internet kind of got us all started down the wrong path from the beginning, which was to think that everything should be free, everything's just a click away, and like that turned out to not really be, a very good business for a lot of companies, a lot of businesses. And so, turn to sources that you trust. Go to the library. The library has, sessions like this one where it helps folks, navigate all of this. So do not be scared to ask for assistance or help, or the recommendation of somebody who might be a little nerdier than you. That's a compliment, not an insult. Couple more questions. Is there a relationship between increased cyber attacks and COVID-19? What do you think, Josh?
In some cases, yes. Like, so COVID, like it was just a great example of the adversaries, the bad guys will take advantage of anything they can. And COVID was such a powerful one. They used it in a litany of different ways, right? Just as the lures in phishing content so much related to, look, there's an outbreak of COVID in your school or in your neighborhood or whatever, right? Take your pick. There are things that will get people to click things because it's that irrational, that motivation to do it. COVID was certainly one of them, but anything that is topical, you will see almost immediately weaponized by the actors behind a lot of the ransomware campaigns and the phishing content. So yeah, COVID was a great one. Anything that's topical will get immediately, you'll start to see that become content and phishing, within hours most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, then one more question from a viewer, but it's actually a 2-parter. So how can I protect against identity theft? And we've talked about some of those things like freezing your credit and making sure you're using different passwords in places. But are there any other tips on that front? And then part B is it riskier to donate to a charity online or by sending a check in the mail? If you had to choose one or the other, which would you do, Josh?
So my default is almost always online these days, depending on a few things, right? If they let me donate using a way that I trust, right? Either with a credit card that I can use as protected, or with like a PayPal or an Apple Pay or something like that. And also, you can do for charity specifically, do your research on them as well, right? Less from the identity theft, but like there are ways to see if your money is getting used well and put to good use. But I almost certainly, it's just like anything that's ephemeral, right? Because like a check, like it's weird how we've evolved, right? You know, if you think, go back 40 years, right? It was just normal business that, you know, put your check or give your credit card to somebody or whatever. And like, those were just trusted, and just the way things have changed over time. That's personally me. I would do online all day, as long as they let me do it in a secure manner, which if you can use a credit card, you got a lot of protection there. Or if they can use a third-party service like a PayPal or something like that, you've got a lot of protection there as well.
Excellent. Well, we're almost out of time. I just wanted to tell folks, like, look, you might have more questions. So part of my job is to answer these for readers of the Washington Post. So you can always look me up over on the Washington Post website. My email is really easy to remember. It's just geoffrey.fowler@washpost.com. It's in everything that I write. Hit me up. I will help you anytime. I'm on Twitter as well. Josh is on Twitter too, JToddSC. I don't know if he's probably busier than I am, so he doesn't have as much time to answer everybody's questions. But if you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I promise you I will hit up Josh and make him answer it. So we will get your question answered. And with that, I think that's what we have time for today. Sarah, I'm going to pass the baton back over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Wow, Jeff, Josh, I want to thank you guys so much for this past hour. I have certainly learned a lot. I'm sure that our viewers have. You've answered a lot of my questions, and you've given me more, so you probably will be hearing from me. But again, thank you to Geoffrey Fowler and Josh Todd for this program tonight, and thank you all of you for attending, and thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.